There's been a lot of talk about the Malaysian government's decision to welcome Palestinian refugees for medical treatment. Critics have posed multiple arguments against it, including that it is unnecessary and will take away resources from locals, making life harder for Malaysians. But is this really the case? Let's discuss this in today's episode of Thought Experiment. One of the questions raised is, why should Malaysia do this? Why not just leave it to other countries nearer to Gaza? Now, Malaysia isn't the only country providing medical aid to Palestinians. Other countries who have accepted Palestinians include Egypt, Turkey, UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. This includes family members of those injured and provisions to attend school and shelter. Indonesia too is now preparing to take upwards of 1,000 refugees from Gaza. A question that comes up is, why should Malaysia welcome refugees? Malaysia has a proud history of providing refuge to those fleeing from conflict while still supporting her own people. In the 1970s, Malaysia received over 250,000 Vietnamese boat people fleeing persecution. At its peak, 8 camps were set up for them, including in the states of Terengganu, Sabah, and Sarawak. When the last camp in Sungai Besi closed in 2001, a total of 248,000 Vietnamese boat people were resettled elsewhere around the world, and 10,000 returned to Vietnam. In the 1990s, Malaysia, along with many other nations, provided protection and educational opportunities to around 300 Bosnian families, refugees, many of whom are now contributing members of Malaysian and Bosnian society. And in 2015, Malaysia opened its doors to 3,000 Syrian refugees. Interestingly, welcoming refugees into Malaysia and granting them the right to work will ultimately contribute positively to the Malaysian economy. A 2019 report by Ideas predicted that by 2024, refugees would contribute over 3 billion ringgit to Malaysia's annual GDP and contribute to over 4,000 jobs in the country. So, does the government's move to welcome Palestinian refugees really take away resources from locals? This has always been one of the big points of contention. This is a tricky one. So let's take a look at the big picture. In 2024, the Malaysian government increased healthcare spending by 13% to 41.2 billion. Education spending increased by 6.3% to 58.7 billion. Additionally, the government allocated about 60 billion to all types of incentives, welfare and subsidies, which is one of the highest in Asia. Now, efforts to enhance income and purchasing power, including reducing the income tax rate for individuals in the M40 group and enhancing the wages of the people, have been done progressively. For the private sector, there's the progressive wage policy, and for the public sector, the government has revised the salary of civil servants after 12 years. Malaysia's public healthcare services are known as one of the best in the world. Many Malaysians are able to enjoy affordable care from treatment to medicines. But there's no doubt there have been complaints of long waiting lines and perhaps other service shortages. Likewise, in education, enrollment rates are high across primary and secondary education for both boys and girls. But equitable access to tertiary education has been a contentious point for many decades. Now, these are legitimate criticisms and should motivate us to hold the government to account. And to be fair, we can see the Malaysian government introducing various reforms to address these issues. But what's important here is to recognize that the Malaysian government's commitment is to both its citizens, the majority of it, and those in need abroad. These efforts are not mutually exclusive. Helping Palestinians does not mean neglecting the needs of Malaysians, and we don't really see that happening. Some have critiqued PM Anwar's support of Hamas, arguing that by taking sides, we become part of the problem. Let's be clear. This is about standing up for the rights and freedoms of the Palestinians, who have been systemically oppressed for many decades, not just in Gaza, but also the West Bank. You don't have to take my word for it, but the ICJ, International Court of Justice, United Nations, and many humanitarian organizations and nations around the world concur to this fact. Additionally, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has been very clear in his support of a two-state solution and has consistently pushed for a ceasefire. In fact, his engagement with Palestinian leaders from Hamas and the Palestinian National Authority, PNA, alongside other regional leaders from Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, and Iran, ensures that a solution remains in sight. Now remember, it's not about taking sides, but about doing what is right for humanity as a whole. Next, people ask, why not treat the Palestinians in Gaza rather than bringing them to Malaysia? With what healthcare system? You see, of the 36 hospitals in Gaza, 32 have been damaged, raided, or face serious shortages of power, medicine, and staff. In fact, even Turkey, who has sent supplies in the form of a medical ship, is also bringing back injured Palestinians into Turkey for further medical treatment. Now, by bringing the injured to Malaysia or any other country for that matter of fact, there's medical treatment, opportunity to recuperate, and shelter, which is not readily available in Gaza. And once the genocide ends, return will be a possibility for them. Big arising question is there more to this criticism? Overall, Malaysians are a loving, caring, and very welcoming bunch, and we understand the plight of others. However, because of that, we must protect ourselves from falling into the trap of bias, selective humanity, and xenophobia. Xenophobia here referring to the dislike, hatred, or fear of outsiders. In psychology, this is known as in-group bias. Thus, if we argue that the government must treat its own people better, then we must too be consistent in our treatment of others. So today's episode of Thought Experiment has been about answering the arising questions and challenging preconceived notions. We must understand that Malaysia's humanitarian efforts are part of a global responsibility rooted in our values of compassion and solidarity. Yes, there are challenges, but we must continue to strive to do better for all communities. So, what do you think? Should Malaysia continue playing its role, or should we no longer do this? We look forward to hearing from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for tuning in today's episode of Thought Experiment. Till next time.